Good afternoon, and welcome to this ETSI webinar, which is on OSM Release 9, Achieving the ETSI NFV Vision. My name is Gavin Craig, and I'm the Senior Technical Content Officer at ETSI, and will be your moderator for today. This webinar offers an overview of the recently announced open source MANO Release 9 and some of its latest features. OSM Release 9 completes the native ETSI NFV standardized Yang data models, ensuring a consistent, standardized, and interoperable way to describe network functions and services, allowing them to be deployed in any telco cloud and orchestrated by any SOL006 compliant orchestrator. From the management perspective, Release 9 offers a seamless integration with Grafana, the world's most popular technology used to compose observability dashboards, that now supports role-based access control in order to provide granular access to dashboards for different users based on their security profiles. Our speakers today will be Francisco Xavier Ramon from Telefonica, Alessandro Garcia from Whitestack, David Garcia from Canonical, and Subhankar Pal from Altron. All are exceptionally well qualified to give this webinar. Before I hand over to Francisco, I'd like to remind you of some key information and points about the webinar today. A recording of the webinar will be made available on demand a few minutes after we've ended it, at the same location as where you are right now. Please feel free to ask questions at any time by clicking on the question button. We'll handle questions at the end of the webinar, and if we don't answer your question, don't worry, we'll get back to you after the webinar by email. We've also attached the slides in PDF format so that you can download them from the attachments button. Now over to you, Francisco.
Thank you, Gavin. Welcome everyone to the webinar of OSM Release 9, where we plan to present you some of the most relevant features that are shipped with this new release. Obviously we can't be exhaustive given the time, but we want to give you an idea where we are and what you can achieve with OSM. And actually, I would like to start with an introduction of what OSM offers, because I understand not everyone in the audience is familiar of what have been the achievements, what have been the functionality that OSM provided already in the previous release, right? So this is the starting point. What does OSM do? I mean, what OSM is a platform to create networks as a service. We are able to create networks on demand and being able to manage them properly later in a convenient fashion. OSM is not alone in the Telco Cloud. It's leveraging on other services that can be invoked on demand, like the service provided by the VIM, the virtual infrastructure, transport connections in the VIM, or even some specific discrete network functions that might be physical. Okay, all that is combined in higher level of abstraction, making network services or even network slices, right? So that grouping is what actually matters from the perspective of creating a network on demand, and is the main focus of OSM. That is done with some conditions. I mean, OSM is not intended to be customized for a very specific environment. It's intended to be able to orchestrate those network services or slices across many different types of virtual infrastructure manager technologies, many types of SDN technologies, and making sure that it can orchestrate, means creating some harmonious combination of them to build the network service that we want. In the same manner, we could have multiple sites with different technologies. So it's not a network, it's about a shape. I mean, so we have data center distributed geographically, and we need to make sure that even those services that need to take into account that geographic distribution can be successfully deployed, right? And that's part of the thing. At the same time, there's an additional source of complexity that is abstracted by OSM, and where OSM excels is making sure that it can compose network functions regardless their nature. So typically, the networks of functions were composed of VMs. There are some other cases where many network functions are composed all of containers, but there are cases that are hybrid. I mean, you could have VMs, you could have containers, you could have a combination, and even, of course, and I did not mention, physical components that need to be orchestrated and interconnected as well. So all those combinations for OSM are treated equally, leveraging on its plugin models, right? So, and the homogenization that happens in the modeling that we'll see later. Actually, although this is not this is given, and I understand that this is not new for most of you. I mean, there are some specific features that need to be taken into account in the modeling to support traffic intensive workloads, and that's also one of the points where the way of work of OSM and the modeling in OSM excel. Okay? And these techniques matter, so are taken into account natively in all this modeling. So the trick is, from the perspective of the successful operation and making things easier, is that OSM provides means to model what you need to deploy and then parameterize it, and later on being able to instantiate it in several places with several technologies and with different parameters, and still being successful on that. So you don't need to know upfront what will be the target technology, the target bin technology where you will be deploying it. Or you don't need to know upfront many of the values that could be perfectly parameters, so IP addresses, keys, etc., etc. So that is the power of having it modeled from the very beginning, okay? From the initial deployment to day 0, the D1, and the D2. Okay. Actually, the OSM package is supposed to be all that. It's supposed to be agnostic to the infrastructure to support all this modeling, but also it's supposed to be easy to be parameterized, so we can customize it on demand upon the moment of instantiation, but also we can customize a living network service by day 2 operations. Okay, and in the models embedded in the package, we can embed that complexity. Actually, we'll see a lot of that during today's session. Okay, about the modeling and about the way to interacting with the applications, and how OSM in the end is a software driving software. Okay. OSM, one of the things that have been one of the key achievements of OSM, and what we are very proud of, is that OSM is delivering. And is delivering what we promised. We are not over-promising, but whichever that we promise, we deliver, and is significant and useful. So only 2 years ago, we were talking about a leap of faith. Many of the things that I've commented before, we were a bit less ambitious than I've been before in the description of what is today available. But back then, we were not that bold. And still, we were talking about, that we need to make sure that what we can promise is realistic, but at the same time challenging. And that is a difficult balance sometimes, because you want to be tread into the science fiction, and of course being unable to deliver. But here we were trying to be careful on that, but we were trying to make sure that we could be capable of going to the moon, is what we were saying back then, and returning safely. So of course you could choose one model or the other, but in the end, we wanted to become Apollo 11 and not the Enterprise, which is great for other purposes, but not for working for real. So we made it. And actually in Release 9, we felt that we reached that objective of going to the moon and returning safely, because it's production ready, as we'll see in a minute. Okay. So we are really proud of the achievements of Release 9. Mostly we had made it already in release 8, I would say, but in release 9, we can consider that we have completed that part of the journey. Among many other features that are available in release 9, for those who are familiar with OSM, maybe this will be very short description of things that you can do with OSM, but the latest additions in this release have been the extension of the modeling in several aspects. In the alignment with SOL6 standard, we'll have a specific section on that, so I won't spend much time on that. The full integration with a declarative arrow, so the way of managing the resources is as accurate as it was before, but now we can have a declarative approach even internally, so it's much easier to report the result and give us a lever to improve the flexibility in the coming releases. So it's been a big leap. And actually, it's quite related to the previous step. We have now a better way of managing pairs of virtual IPs. It's more convenient the path. Regarding the VNF lifecycle management, something that I was commenting before about part of the day 1 and the day 2, we are now supporting different enhancements, the support of distributed proxy charm, so we can decentralize the workload of the software that manages other software. And that gives us some nice properties I will see later. We are supporting the version of 3 of Helm. Previously, we were supporting that was the state of the art, was Helm 2, but now that Helm 2 has been deprecated, we are supporting Helm 3. We still support Helm 2 for compatibility reasons, for those legacy applications that still are in Helm 2, but right now we are settling by default on Helm 3. We have a Kubernetes VCA in the case installation, which helps a lot with the bootstrap of many of the functions in OSM. Centralized VCA for KNF, so we can do that as well. We have a smoother integration with external systems. This is part also of our path to production readiness, and it's a result of those initial deployments. So the integrations with RBAC are much simpler. And of course, the subscription API that has been enhanced to report to the OSS and BSS systems. And last but not least, the user interface. It's very important that you have a consistent user interface and you preserve coherency between the API, between what you are doing in command line and what we can do in the user interface. And that includes also, we'll have a specific section today on the support of multi-tenancy in Grafana and integration with the global RBAC policies in OSM, along with many other improvements in the user interface that for those who are familiar with Release 8, we have changed it in Release 8, and now we have given many steps that we wanted to give during Release 9. Okay. Something that we always would like to say is that, I mean, we have, you don't need to take at face value what we are saying. I mean, something that we are very proud in OSM is that everyone can test and validate what we are saying. So the packages that we are using and producing in the OSM community, even for testing, even for demonstrating use cases or whatever, are available, published and available in several locations. One of them is OSM's GitLab, where we do the development and evolution of these packages, but also we are using, and that's been successfully tested in our previous Hackfest, some repositories that allow you from the OSM download automatically the packages that you want or search the packages that you want and consume them as part of a network service. So this is simplifying a lot the life cycle of preparation of the packages and actually for anyone who is willing to test OSM and understand the capabilities, this is ready from the very beginning. Okay. Actually, some of the use cases that we are particularly proud is the most complex one that we have built in community, and this is available in that those repositories that I have mentioned. Is the use case of a full EPC with Magma, where we are combining everything that I've mentioned before, or the VM plus Kubernetes plus physical network functions, the network slicing, high performance data plane. I mean, even the management of an underlay OSDN if you want. So all that is embedded in that use case, the packages are available, and all the functionality can be tested. It's even quite well documented, and it's likely that you will see further updates around this use case in the coming months, because we are really proud of being able to consolidate all that knowledge and all that functionality around one big use case. Okay, in terms of the OSM community, is quite healthy. The situation is really large and diverse, with all types of participants, 142 members as of today, but still accepting participants and incorporating new people. The last incorporation was Intel from Peru, and also present in other places in South America. So that makes 16 global service providers part of OSM, but not just service providers. We have all type of players across all the telco cloud industry. And even to classify this in a different manner, I mean, we have what we call the OSM ecosystem that you can track. Is a list of companies who are willing to list their product and offer related to OSM in what a type of yellow pages. It's an opt-in process, so this is not an exhaustive catalog of what you can do with OSM, and it's far from being there. Unfortunately, there are more other stuff that is going on outside the ecosystem, but main players are in the OSM ecosystem, which is what counts, and help us to display the size and relevance of what is happening underneath for those who are not familiar yet with what is happening in OSM ecosystem. So you have distros for OSM, as in any relevant open source project, but also the consulting and integration. So in case you want to deploy quickly, probably you would like to leverage on that path, either one path or both. In the OSM arena, who is interacting successfully with OSM's northbound interface and other subsystems, VNFs that are part of OSM ecosystem, beams that have been successfully tested and supported by OSM community, several training offers, and a lot of research projects that are using OSM, provided that it's free and it works, and the OSM community is supportive. They are leveraging that, and it's the orchestrator of choice for most of the 5G initiatives in Europe. Okay, I was mentioning the production readiness. Not everything is public, but when something happens that is public, is worth mentioning. Telefónica Movistar Chile announced at the end of last year, in December, the commercial deployment of ETSI OSM, that they have completed their commercial deployment of OSM. So that was a fact, and that's an excellent show of what, again, this is the tip of the iceberg, but this is quite significant because in the region of South America, it was the first OSM deployment, so it's quite significant. You can see the link to the press release in case you want to know more about it. Unfortunately, it's a bit cut off, but you can see the second line, and you continue the URL, you get it. Okay, so if it's interested, and you see that was made by Waystack together with Indra. Okay. Well, so what we'll tell you during this webinar, first we'll give some time to improve network functions operations. Our colleague David Garcia from Canonical and the leader of the most relevant module to this development will tell you about these improvements that happen in Release 9. Later on, will Subankar Pal from Altran, the module development leader for service assurance in OSM, will tell you about how the integration with Grafana with OSM's RBAC policies has been completed. And last but not least, because this is an activity that we are really proud, considering all the effort that was behind and the time of analysis that's required, the adoption of the ETSI NFV-SOL006 specification as part of the information model for VNF description that we are supporting in OSM, and the kind of feedback that we are providing to ETSI NFV, and that part will be led by Alejandro Garcia from Whitestack, an OSM committer, and also one of the main contributors to that feature. Okay. Before we move on to these slots, in case that you want to learn more and you have some appetite to learning more about what OSM can do for you, you can join us to our upcoming Hackfest, which was is due to the 8th to 12th of March. It's a remote event, like everything in the pandemic era, but still has been quite successful in the previous editions that was remotely held. So you are kindly invited to participate. Yeah. And that's it. Now I would like to introduce David Garcia, Mode Development Lead from N2VC and leader of these developments that will be discussed about network function operations. So over to you, David.
Thank you, Francisco. Hello, everyone. My name is David Garcia, and I am excited to talk about improved network function operations in OSM Release 9. I will be talking about challenges in day 1 and day 2 operations, the OSM solution to those challenges, a couple of new features we added in Release 9, and then I will end with a demo. So, as my colleague Francisco Javier presented, OSM is an end-to-end service orchestrator that, among all its features, it allows to deploy and configure network functions. And that is great, but only with that is not enough. We need a way to operate and to execute action operations on a daily basis in the deployed network functions. Some examples of these operations are to do a backup, for example, of an application, register a new user to a particular system, etc. There is no limit to the things we can do with operations, and all operations are custom to a particular network function. But of course, OSM and telcos will always have to deal with a variety of network functions, both in terms of vendors and nature. In terms of vendors, because there could be one network service that contains several network functions from different vendors, and in terms of nature, because we have to deal with containerized network functions that may live in Kubernetes, virtual network functions living in a virtual infrastructure manager like OpenStack, or even physical network functions where the network functions is a physical appliance. So this variety presents a challenge at the operation and integration level because we need to have a standardized way of operating all these different kinds of network services. The OSM solution to these challenges is to use operators, which I'm going to explain right now in the following slides. Charms are operators that encapsulate a piece of code to drive the operations of an application. And also charms provide the mechanisms for that integration between operators to happen. I will go deep into that in the following slides. So I use the same example always to understand what an operator is. So the example I use is to understand what a human operator is. And basically, a human operator represents the expert of a particular application, or in this case, network function. And as the expert, it has the knowledge about how to properly manage that network function, how to install the software needed for that network function, how to configure it, how to get logs from it, etc. But these are just examples of what a human operator could do. The list is not fixed. You can, depending on the network function, there could be as many actions as needed. The main two downsides of a human operator is that human operators first are experts of a particular application, and on a daily basis, we need to be able to perform operations to the network functions without having to call the expert to manually execute the advanced commands needed for that action to happen. And also, human operators can make mistakes, might forget some steps while executing an operation, and in the end, we need a repeatable way of performing actions. So in the Kubernetes world, there's the concept of operator pattern that basically consists of a piece of software that drives another piece of software. So this is the pattern that the charms follow, and OSM take advantage of them to have operations. Charms encapsulate the knowledge of the human operator, and that knowledge is presented as code or scripts. So there will be inside the charm some scripts to, for example, install the network function, do a backup of a network function, get logs from the network function, and so on and so forth. But again, these are just examples. And this solves the problems presented by human operators, and we can do operations at scale with no problem and in a more simplified way. So operators in OSM are managed by a component named VCA. The VCA is, or the VCA in OSM is Juju, which is an operator lifecycle manager that is responsible for managing all the charms. First of all, in this slide, I have put the operator code as a box in there, and I won't get deep into it in this webinar because of the time, but I would encourage you all to join us in the next Hackfest, where I will explain more about operators and how to create them, how to onboard them to OSM, and so on. So if you are interested, you can join the Hackfest and you will learn a lot about how to develop operators. So this slide shows a high-level picture of the components involved in the operations. The VCA is part of OSM, and it manages the operator code, which has the scripts to manage the life cycle of the network function and may have several actions to interact with it. When an OSM user then wants to execute an action, the VCA will receive that order and it will trigger the action in the operator, which will then execute the script associated to the specific action. Another important matter is the integration. Only deploying, configuring, and operating the network function is not enough, because in most of the cases, network functions won't be a standalone application working on its own. But we will have several network functions with dependencies between each other, and the operators provide the space for integration between them. And to handle that integration, there will be also some scripts to properly deal with the integration, sending the information needed between operators and using that information to properly configure the network function for that integration to happen. As I said before, there are several types of network functions from different nature and vendors. Charms are universal operators because they allow us to operate network functions regardless of their nature and enables the space for integration. Now I'm going to present or talk about two new features that we added in Release 9. The first one is distributed proxy charms. So the operator code needs to live somewhere. And before Release 9, these operators could only live in one place. By default, this place is the same machine in which OSM is installed. So if we have two network functions, each one of them in a different VIM or in a different virtual infrastructure manager like OpenStack, the operators for these two network functions will both live in the same place, the OSM machine. But in Release 9, we are now able to place these proxy charms closer to the network functions and distribute them across different VIMs, removing that single point of failure. And also, in Release 9, we have improved the experience using Kubernetes operators. We offer now a much more integrated experience by having the same VCA managing both K8s and non-K8s operators. This means less resource consumption, improved efficiency, and a more scalable design. Now I'm going to present a demo of the experience deploying Kubernetes operators through OSM. The containerized network function that I will deploy is a Squid proxy. So the Squid proxy is a web proxy that by default it's configured to block all traffic, and but we can execute actions for adding or deleting allowed URLs. Okay, so this is a very simple example. Just to get the idea of what can be achieved, okay? But the same ideas apply to more complex workloads like a 5G core, all containerized with charts. Okay, so I'm going to present my screen. Okay, I think you can see now my screen. So in the screen, you can see two terminals. The one on top is my machine where I have OSM installed. The one in the bottom is a Kubernetes cluster that lives in another machine, okay, separate from the one in which OSM is installed, okay, and this Kubernetes cluster is using micro-K8s. That is a very simple, lightweight snap to install Kubernetes in just 2 commands. Okay. So, and what I'm listing there right now in the Kubernetes cluster machine are the pods that currently exist. Okay, the containers that are living in the Kubernetes right now. Okay, so as one of the first steps, we will execute the OSM K8s cluster add command in order to add the Kubernetes cluster to OSM. Okay, with OSM K8s cluster list, we can see that this OSM K8s cluster that I added is properly enabled both for Juju and Helm. Okay, so as the next step, I will upload some packages that I was given. Okay, let's imagine that these 2 packages that I'm going to onboard to OSM were given to me, and I'm not the expert of the network function, but the expert provide me those, or the vendor provide me these 2 packages. So I'm going to onboard the CNF and the network service. Okay, so now that I have the packages uploaded to OSM, I will now create a network service instance with the command OSM ns-create. Okay, if I do OSM ns-list, I will be able to see that the network service instance is in a built-in state, so it is deployed right now. And if you see in the bottom, I see that in my Kubernetes cluster, there's one new namespace, and I see some pods being created. So the squid operator is the operator I've been talking about, okay, the charm, and this one deploys the actual workload that is squid, okay? And I can get information about the network service by doing OSM NS show and the network service. Okay, so this KDU instance, in this case, is the namespace that was created in Kubernetes. And I could very easily see the status of the VCA, that is Juju. And with doing just Juju status. And doing Juju status, what I can see is that there's one application that is a squid that has been deployed. And I see also the IP address of that service, of that KNF. So now I'm going to go ahead and test the squid. So I'm going to set my HTTPS proxy to this IP address and the port of the web proxy. And I'm going to do a curl to HTTPS osm.etsy.org, okay? And I'm getting 1,403 error, okay? Because by default, I said that all the URLs are blocked. So now I'm going to execute an action to add one URL. So I'm executing OSM NS action. The action name is add URL, and here I'm passing the URL for the osm.etsy.org. So now I have executed that action through OSM. The VCA has received the action, let's say, and now the workload has been properly reconfigured to allow that URL. Okay, so now if I do this, I'm not getting the error, I'm getting some HTML here, okay, and this is because the action has worked properly. And I could do a delete URL action, okay, and now if I execute the curl, then I will get the error again. So that's all from my side. I'm going to now hand it to my colleague Subankar, and he will continue with the presentation.
Thank you, David. So, hello everyone. My name is Shubhankar Pal, and I will be talking about another new feature that we are introducing in OSM Release 9, which is multi-tenancy in OSM's metrics dashboard. So OSM provides a very rich role-based access control so that the users and projects of OSM gets a controlled access to the OSM resources. So as you can see in this slide, there are three different ways in which this role-based access control is provided in OSM today. The first one is the internal RBAC configuration, in which the users and the projects are created inside the common DB of OSM. And through the northbound interface of OSM, you can write into the common DB and get access to the users and projects. The second one is through a keystone, which is outside the main OSM core, and it through a keystone I can authenticate the users and the projects, and these are eventually kept in an external MySQL database. And third, which is I think a more enterprise grade configuration, is where the enterprise users are in their own enterprise database, for example, LDAP in this case, and the LDAP is connected to Keystone, and then Keystone is in turn connected to the OSMs, so that OSM can get all the information. So these are the three different ways in which the RBAC can be configured for OSM. So the multi-tenancy feature extends this comprehensive RBAC to the metrics dashboards which are housed inside Grafana, so that the users and their corresponding dashboards are separated and are put in their own space inside Grafana as well, which was not the case before Release 9. So as you can see in this slide, when a user or the project is created, the RBAC feature inside Grafana now extends the RBAC in OSM to have the same number of users and teams in Grafana, so that the dashboards can be properly organized. So if you have been into Hackfest in the previous versions, you would have seen that while you have a very good separation of network services in your own users, but when it comes to seeing the dashboards and the metrics in Grafana, they were all in one user, and that was sometimes confusing. So that is why this feature is very useful for users who want to also have the monitoring enabled for their services. So in before Release 9, what happened is, in for example, user 1 and user 2 have their respective projects, project 1 and project 2, and through this they are logging into OSM, and they are creating their respective network services. Now they were all created in the admin user and default team in Grafana. There was no way for user 1 and user 2 to have separate space, and sometimes it becomes very confusing that okay, why I should which is my dashboard and which one is user 2's dashboard. So what we have done in Release 9 with this multi-tenancy feature now, whenever user 1 and user 2 create their network services inside OSM, they will have a separate space in Grafana as well, that will help them to have a separate view of their particular artifacts and their particular metrics monitoring, and they will not be able to see others. That is one way, makes things simpler, and also adds an extra level of security, so that the other user cannot barge into your space and destroy the work that you are doing. So this slide talks about how we are bringing in this new feature in OSM, and how this new feature interacts with the other components in OSM. So the request for creating a user and the project starts from the OSM client, and it comes to NBI in number 1 and 2, and through the Kafka bus it goes to MON, which is the monitoring module in OSM, which through the newly introduced tenant manager now can help to create these users projects and associate users projects and the network services inside inside the Grafana user and team spaces. Okay, so how this mapping has been done? The OSM RBAC has 4 different kind of entities: user, that you can see in blue here, the user, the project, the role, and the network functions and the VNFs. Now the same kind of entities are in Grafana, but it is a bit different sometimes in the names. For example, user has a corresponding user, the project has a team, which you can see in yellow here. The role has a team permission, and the network services will have dashboards. And it also supports very complex kind of relations. For example, one user can be part of multiple projects, and one project can have multiple users. As you see in blue in left, that is how the RBAC is created. And the same kind of complexity can be replicated and can be addressed in Grafana now as well, thanks to the multi-tenancy feature, that users and teams can have many-to-many relationship. Okay, now with that, let me show you a demo of about this multi-tenancy feature. And let me share my screen. Okay. So first, let me get into the OSM's UI through admin user. So as you can see, there is an admin user, and I have created 3 other users, user 1, user 2, and user 3. And they are part of corresponding projects, project 1, project 2, and project 3. The same users are also replicated in Grafana because of this multi-tenancy feature. So if I go here, okay, so you can see that the same number of users, user 1, user 2, user 3 are created, and these users are connected to their corresponding projects. For example, project 1 has user 1 has one of its member. Okay, so now let me quickly create one more project and see how it comes up in Grafana. So let's create a user here. So I create user 4 and give it a password. And create this user and then assign it to the project. Say I assign it to project 1 and give it a role and apply. And here, if I refresh, so you see there's a user 4 that is created, which was not there earlier. And because it was associated with project 1, so project 1 has 2 members now, which are user 1 and user 4. So what we have seen now here is that as soon as we create a user, the user space is also created in Grafana and is associated with the corresponding team. Now, okay, so let me also show you, for example, say if I go to one of the user in OSM and show you what its space looks like. So I'm logging into user 1 here. And this is user 1. And if I go and show you its network service, so there is one network service called HF matrix 1 that is there. Similarly, user 2 has HF matrix 2 and so on. Now, if I go to Grafana and see all the dashboards, for example, project 1 has HF matrix 1, project 2 has HF matrix 2. So in my admin user, I can see all the different projects and their corresponding network service dashboard. But say if I log out and log in as a user 1 here, and go to manage, you'll see that I only have project 1, which is user 1's project, and he only sees his own dashboard. He is not seeing others' dashboard. If I click on this dashboard, I see the CPU utilization, memory utilization, and other matrices that it is monitoring. So in summary, what you see here is that now you have a separate user and project space in Grafana, which is replicating the RBAC of OSM, and the dashboards are created inside their own users. So that's all from my side. I will now pass on to my colleague Alejandro for taking you to through the SOL6 feature.
All right, thanks to Ankar, and hello everyone. I am Alejandro Garcia from Whitestack, and I'm here to talk about about the process of adoption of the Solution 6 model, and how in Release 9 we adopted it and are now using it and able to provide feedback with it to the ETSI. So many of you may not have actually heard of this Solution 6 standard, and you may be wondering, how does this affect OSM? Well, the first, this image here more or less summarizes this. In a nutshell, NFV standardization emerged mainly from this ETSI industry specification group. And these sets of standards are continually getting reviewed and updated because they aim to incorporate the latest technologies, and they want to ensure correct NFV implementation in multi-vendor environments. And well, on this last point is where the OSM project plays a key part, because it can contribute first-hand practical experience. And as you know, and okay, as Francisco Javier already mentioned on the introduction part, the OSM community and the whole OSM ecosystem provides real experience, for example, with Hackfest and Plugtest events. And we as a community can use this experience to contribute improvements to the standards. So as a consequence, what actually happens is that OSM complements the work of the ETSI NFV and vice versa. So note that this practical feedback is really important, and it creates this continuous loop in the standardization process, helping to improve the standards and to accelerate time to market for these new NFV solutions. So looking at this continuous improvement process with a little more detail, this is what actually was planned and happened through the alignment to SOL6. So on the one hand, we have here on the left side of the image the ETSI NFV standards. And on the other hand, we have OSM on the right, which is progressively adopting these standards. So for the particular case of Solution 6, the standard is expressed as Yam models. So for those who have never heard of Yam, and I'm saying this because neither I had any idea of what was Yam before entering the OSM world, Yam is a data modeling language, which means you can specify entities, the structures of those entities, and how they relate between each other. So all of this helps to create certain rules. For example, you can say that an interface has certain attributes and that a virtual machine can have many interfaces. So then what the Solution 6 standard does, it's exactly that. It defines which entities exist within the network function virtualization domain and how they relate. Now, OSM does not only adopt this solution 6 specification, but it also extends it through a standard Yam augment mechanism. So these augments allow the modeling of features that are not yet present on the standard. You should think about these new augment modeling options as new additions and no deviations, which means we are complying with the standard and at the same time making it richer. This point is really important because OSM was already working with previous OSM-specific models. That's why we had OSM versions 8 and before. So once again, we could use this past work and experience to improve what the standard already offered. Thus, we augmented the Solution 6 model to ensure no functionality was lost. And now these augments are being documented and sent back to the NFV ISG for discussion and their potential inclusion in future releases of the standard. Well, in fact, a funny story, the discussion must be taking place exactly right now because the meeting of that IFA committee is overlapped with this webinar. No. So what are the benefits of adopting this? As you may imagine, the main benefits of adopting and continuously improving these standards are mainly related with consistency and quality of the produced VNF packages. These standardized packages enhance design, management, and interoperability of VNFs, and all of this results in the expansion of the OSM ecosystem. So, by adopting these NFV standards, OSM can boost its VNF ecosystem growth and ensure a standard-based development and maintenance of its own VNF packages. And well, finally, as we have already mentioned, this relationship is a two-way street. Considering we can provide feedback in return to the improving the standards. And in fact, OSM standards alignment goes beyond SOL006, and the picture here on the right shows that OSM was already supporting another standards like the NFV Solution 5, or NFV SOL2 since Release 6. And while it is also planned to align with the NFV SOL4, which is the standard of VNF package structure, and we are planning to do that for next release. So you can see standards adoption and this whole alignment and feedback loop is prioritized and considered at the core of OSM. Well, now, I did not want to finish my part of the presentation without showing you at least some fragments of a VNF descriptor compliant with SOL6. Because as I said earlier, the standards specify which entities exist in an NFV domain and how they all interconnect. So what the SOL6 standard does is expliciting the structure that a descriptor file must have. These descriptors are the ones that say, hey, let's instantiate this VNF consisting of these virtual machines with these specifications and these configurations. So, for example, these two pictures here are taken from our OSM UI. I'm not going into depth with that, but for the the part of going into depth of a descriptor and designing it with the UI composer, which is the right image here on the slide, you can and are well invited to our Hackfest, where we do this. But basically, the UI composer, which shows the picture of the right, allows you to visually define and review the structure of a VNF. So in this case, we can see that our VNF is composed of 2 virtual machines with 2 interfaces each. The virtual machines are, of course, the one labeled as VMs and with red icons. Now, 2 of these interfaces are connected internally and 2 are exposed to the outside. These 2 external interfaces, which are the ones marked with a blue circle, are described on the VNF descriptor file on the blue square. So those sections from lines 8 to 16 defines these 2 external interfaces. Now, if we move a little down in the same descriptor example, you can see that the connection between the interfaces, the internal interfaces, which is called a virtual link, is also defined here. And if we move even a little more, you can see that each virtual machine with each of their interfaces are also defined here. So again, essentially the purpose of these solution 6 descriptors is to specify the structure and the various attributes and configurations of our VNF. Well, now, it is unlikely that this is your first OSM webinar or event for some of you. So you might be wondering about portability from older descriptors. So, well, as part of this alignment process, a translation CLI tool from former OSM descriptors from release 8 to SOL6 descriptors has already been developed, and it has been incorporated as part of the official OSM client, which is this CLI tool that was already shown on the demos by David. So now, with this translator tool, we have already been available to adapt all our previous VNF descriptors. So, for example, if you went to our latest OSM Hackfest with release 8, all the descriptors used in that occasion are now already available in the SOL6 format. Well, again, Francisco Javier already mentioned this, but this repository here on the right is where you can find VNF packages ready to use for release 9. So this work is already available for you to use and test. Well, and finally, it's worth mentioning that this translation tool is already being used by vendors, for instance, during this ongoing February plug test event. Well, now, to sum up the takeaways from this alignment process, standards alignment is at the heart of the OSM project because it is a great opportunity to capitalize on the synergy between standardization and open source approaches. So this relationship between the 2 projects is appropriate and desired because it allows to ensure that both standards and software grow on maturity, with the objective to expand and increase this diverse ecosystem of orchestrators, clouds, and network functions we have already been talking about. And finally, as I just mentioned, ensuring this large and diverse ecosystem is part of the main objectives of OSM. And as such, this alignment provides packages and tools which are already available and currently being used and tested by other vendors and operators. So, well, that was all I had to say about this alignment process. So, I think we can...
Yeah. Thank you. I think that we can take questions now.
Yes, I was going to say that.
Yeah. All right. Thanks a lot, Alejandro. So, well, there are many questions, so probably we'll need to be effective on trying to answer them. There are many technical questions and a few ones of high level. So one of them is about the adoption of OSM. Could you name Tier 1 operators that selecting OSM to orchestrate the virtualized mobile network, 4G, 5G? I have the same similar question regarding to the deployment in production in Chile and in which use case. Right. Again, talk briefly about this. It's obviously not a secret after this press release that OSM is the orchestrator of choice in Telefónica. It happens to be a Tier 1 service providers, among others involved in OSM, but this is at least clear and public now. And it's not use case specific, as you may imagine, but because it's part of a strategy of the Telco Cloud and homogenization of the platform, so it's not use case specific. So of course it's covering those use cases among others. So that is one thing. Actually, the about 5G and 4G, there were some specific question. Is there any use case available for 5G? I saw in last ecosystem day that Tata was presenting a 5G use case. Is it available to reproduce this POC? Okay, so could take this one. Maybe David, I think that he had some use cases that were publicly available.
Yes, but I think we can forward them to Slack, okay, and there we can share with them both the links for the documentation so that people can try this POC that Tata presented. And also there was another question about the commands that were executed during the demos, and we can share those commands through Slack too. So maybe we can point them to a specific channel for this.
Yeah, why not? I think that this is an excellent opportunity as well to invite the people to join for a specific questions like this, to join the Slack channel of OSM that is available to anyone. So it's much easier to share that kind of information. In case that you can find it already in our documentation, we will be extremely happy to share the pointers in there. That information is available. What I was mentioning is that regarding the 5G, there are two kinds of things. Obviously, experiences with commercial VNFs. I would let the participants who have been engaged on those experiences elaborate on them. The other is that, and I believe this is more the intention of the questions, is whether they can replicate the use cases, and that is where the information that David Garcia is commenting is relevant, because they have been extremely kind to share the packages and all the information to deploy those use cases yourselves. So this is, this is unvaluable because you can see a fairly complex use case in action in the same manner that we have seen during the presentation, the use case with Magma that is illustrating the whole process and all the techniques that you will possibly need, not just in 4G or 5G, but in everything else, including scenarios, etc., etc. So this, the use case is used as an excuse to cover all that functionality that is relevant for more than use case. But if you connect to one of these links that are shared here, you could perfectly find the location on where to subscribe to our Slack channel, and you will be welcome, and we can get into the details of the specific commands that we have typed, etc., etc. We take note for other editions, so we could probably include some additional slides in the backup with the detail of the commands or the demonstration or something. But at this moment, given that the presentation is already uploaded in the platform and frozen, probably it would be more efficient that you take advantage of the Slack channel, and that's it. That said, please remember that we have our Hackfest plan, our next Hackfest plan for the 8th of March, the week of the 8th of March. So in case that you want to explore this case or any other use case in complete full detail, you'll be more than welcome to come there. Okay. So that's one thing. The other, entering in more technical ones about modeling, we have at least a couple of questions. Well, maybe for Alejandro, still Yang-based modeling is adopted. And can you please explain regarding the connectivity and the VLD? I believe that you explained a bit about that, but feel free to comment, Alejandro.
Yes. Well, about the Yam modeling, yes, as we have talked, we are still using Yam models to describe how VNFs and their entities are related. And the only difference here is that, well, since we are now aligned with Solution 6 standard, these Yam models aren't written by us, like OSM project, but rather than are the ones from the ETSI standard. So if you go to the official GitLab SOL6 repo, you can find all the Yam models, the source code here, there. And what we have done, maybe I can return some slides back to this. Yes, what I have done was saying here is that here at OSM, what we did was expanding these SOL6 models with some Yam augments, and this allows us to specify some options or features that currently are not available on the standard. And one small and particular case, for example, the SOL6 standard at the VNF level does not provide a way for vendors to define alarms. So you cannot, on the SOL6 standard, or at least not on the same, following the same model, you have no way to define how, I don't know, an alarm for your VNF if the CPU goes beyond a threshold. And in OSM, we had that feature before. So what we did was creating these Yam augments to extend this model and, of course, add these fields and these features to existing SOL6 model. And well, as we were talking, this is now being presented as feedback to the standard groups, to the ETSI ISG. So the idea is to keep on this feedback and adoption and feedback loop, so that both the standard and the features can grow and improve together. So I think that's with the question of the young.
All right, and about the BLD, I believe that in your example you had commented about that already, right?
Yes. Well, here the thing is that here the descriptor is not complete, but you can see here that this internal BLD exists, and I think that if we move to the next slide, you can see, for instance, here that this interface management VM ETH1 int actually points to this virtual link descriptor. On the previous OSM model, this was defined the other way. So when we define the BLD, we there listed the interfaces. Well, here in SOL6, it's the other way. For each interface, you list the BLDs where they exist. So again, this is not complete, so it lacks the same information for the other data VM, but it's basically the same thing. You define your connection point, which would be your interface, and you specify which BLD it should be included.
Mm-hmm. All right, excellent. Thank you. And now that we are entering into these gory details, there's one question about the Squid proxy demo. Where does the network net1 parameter come from in the case cluster create function? Is it a network that must be available in the Vim microstack, or is it created from scratch while deploying the case cluster? So I guess that David can shed some light on that part of the demo.
Yes, thanks, Francisco. Generically, when you add the K8s cluster to OSM, you need to do two things. Tell OSM the Vim associated to the K8s cluster, okay? So in this case was microstack in my case. And also you need to tell OSM which networks of the Vim are available to the K8s cluster, but those networks are not created when you add the K8s cluster. So in my case, the Vim was a microstack, and the network net1 was OSM X. But of course, you may want to only use Kubernetes, and for that you don't need to have a Vim. So OSM allows you to do that by creating, so you can create a dummy or fake, let's say, a Vim account, okay, and attach the K8s cluster to it, so you don't need to create an OpenStack if the only network functions that you are going to deploy are Kubernetes network functions. I think that should answer.
Yeah, actually, also on that demo you did, how can you name the namespace inside the VNFD?
So in the VNFD, you can put a list of, let's say, KDUs that are Kubernetes deployment units. The name of the KDU will be used for the namespace, but OSM will append to that name of the KDU a unique string, and that whole name will be used as the namespace. Because you can actually deploy that VNFD several times, and if you just use the fixed name in the descriptor, there might be some conflicts because you cannot create the same namespace twice in the Kubernetes, for example. So to avoid those conflicts, some unique string is appended to the name of the KDU.
Okay, very clear. Thank you. There was another question. Do you have a complete use case with OpenSlice, a service order management system on top of OSM? Well, that is an excellent question because there are several initiatives with OSM members that are participating on that specific case. There is one that is particularly significant because they have registered it as a POC. An OSM POC, as you know, we have a POC framework in OSM similar to the one that already existed in ETSI NFV, but in this case, obviously, with the theme of OSM having is the main condition. And the point is that they are willing to share that information. The point is that that POC is also an official POC in CSM, that, as you know, is a project precisely on the zero-touch automation of networks. So this one is a bridge between both initiatives. And the information, again, I regret that we don't have a reasonable means to share the link right now, but well, we'll find a means to share it with you. And even in the worst case, if you can engage in the Slack channel to OSM, we will be really glad to share all the links that we have produced and commented in this session, because I think that they can provide you all the information that you might possibly want to gather. Okay, but again, this is not the only initiative on OpenSlice. There are some other OSM members running these initiatives in a more, I would say, specific fashion for their own use cases. Okay. Okay, there's a thing that we have the last one. Well, there was another question. If we can paste all the commands, well, it's better that we can, yeah, we share them in the Slack channel, all the details of the commands for your own benefit. And there's an interesting one. I'm a developer interested in trying installing OSM. What is the minimum hardware and software configuration needed? I think that anyone can take this question. I don't know if Subankar, I believe that was.
Yeah, let me take this one. So the minimum requirement for OSM installation is a virtual machine, maybe with 2 CPUs, 6 GB of RAM, and 40 GB of hard disk, and Ubuntu 18.4 64-bit is required. But the recommended configuration that on which OSM should be run is 2 CPUs and 8 GB of RAM instead of 6, and 40 GB of hard disk. So you can always run with a minimal configuration, but if you want to run some very serious network services, we recommend you to use the version which is slightly higher, which has 8 GB of RAM instead of 6 GB.
Okay, in addition to that, of course, this is the correct configuration for a tester or for a developer. Of course, there are more advanced configurations with HA and so on that would require replicating the resources, and maybe David would be in the position of, or Alejandro would be in a position of commenting about that. I believe that the charm installation is already documented and is providing the instructions on how to make an HA installation.
Yeah, so in upstream, you can install OSM with, there are several flavors, let's say, of OSM, or several installation methods, let's say. And one is the trunk installer that has an option to deploy OSM in HA. So all the components are scaled and so on. And of course, for that deployment, the minimum requirement or the recommended, let's say, requirements are 4 CPUs, 16 gigs of RAM, and the disk. Well, the minimum is 40 gigs, but the recommended is 100 gigs of disk.
Okay, excellent. So I think we are we've covered all the questions that we had. So
Yes, thank you very much.
thank you.
Thank you. I would like to thank all of you who have listened to this event, and also to thank again all 4 speakers for the excellent slides and the presentations they've made. I think we can close now, but I would like to remind you to keep an eye out on the ETSI Bright Talk channel. We make webinars regularly, and we'll be looking forward to welcome you on other ones. So for now, goodbye and thank you.